Hey, what is going on? It is 12 noon on Wednesday, which means it's time for this week's episode of Ask the Instructor. My name is John Christmas. This show is brought to you by the Tampa School of Real Estate. We're here every Wednesday, 12 noon Eastern Time, to help you understand the technical side of the real estate industry. And what we're talking about today is understanding how to come up with the value of an investment property. Piece of real estate that's going to be used for some sort of investment purpose. We're going to be spending some time dealing with calculating income capitalization, maybe if you're looking at doing a flip on the property, how to kind of understand that, and really a lot of basics of understanding what makes an investment property valuable. So stick with us. I'm John Christmas. You're watching Ask the Instructor.
You are watching Ask the Instructor. Absorb the knowledge. Become the expert.
Hey, welcome back to this week's episode of Ask the Instructor. My name is John Christmas. The show is brought to you by the Tampa School of Real Estate. We're here every Wednesday, 12 noon Eastern Time, to talk about the technical side of the real estate industry. And what we're talking about today is known as investment value. Now, how do you come up with investment value, and how is it different than what most people will normally think of when they think of value is market value? Market value is not your investment value. Market value is what you could sell a property for normally in a normal market under normal conditions, what a property would probably sell for. That's what market value is. Whereas when you're trying to find the investment value, finding the value in the property for investment purposes, this might be part of the equation. You know, if you're planning on flipping the property, reselling it later, yes, you do want to know the market value. And that's where you want to figure out what is your goal ultimately. What do you want to do with this property? Because you don't want to go in there and just buy something and hope you figure it out. Now, there could be situations where you have a property that's such a good deal, anything you do with it could work, but you ultimately need to figure out what is going to work best. Because depending on what you're planning to do with the property will dictate what it is it needs to be done to the property and how much money might need to be invested in the property and what type of method we're going to be using to come up with the value. There used to really just be two schools of thought for the most part in most rental situations with the long-term rental and the fix and flip. But now also in the Airbnb, Verbo age, there's also this little short-term rental category that has become a lot more popular, especially if you live in a more tourism-driven area like a lot of places here in Florida. Now, depending on what you ultimately want to do with this property, what your end strategy is going to depend on, again, what method you're going to be using to figure out the value and a lot of other parameters. This really needs to be first and foremost what you are considering, and then you run the numbers to make sure it makes sense on this. Because if it doesn't, well, you might still be able to use one of these other options. Now, let's just briefly, vaguely go over some of the differences between, let's say this one here. This is usually the popular category for people when they think of real estate investing, especially when you're new to real estate investing. This seems like one of the main ways to invest in real estate. And this is a popular way to invest in real estate where you find a property, you fix it up, and you sell it for more. Let's talk about this one because this, I would say, would be the number one mistake I see people make when they're considering fixing up a property. And this translates not just to people who are looking to invest in investment real estate where they're an absentee owner, where they don't live on the property. Yes, that applies to these people, but this also applies to people buying a property for their home. Because a lot of times somebody might want to buy a property for their home, fix it up, and then they could sell it later. Now, depending on how much they're banking on this portion right here, will definitely make it where they have to pay a lot more attention to what they're doing in these fixes and ultimately what they're getting in the property for. So the goal with this fix and flip strategy is that you buy the property, you fix it, and then you sell it. Now, when you sell it, this is the mistake I see most people make right here. When you sell it, that's where this number comes back into play. The market value. So this is extremely important if you're trying to flip real estate, is understanding that the market value of the property is what it's probably going to sell for. And there may be some fixes that helps increase the market value slightly, but you have to keep in mind the neighborhood that the property is located in and make sure that you're not over improving the property in relation to the neighborhood, because if you turn this house into a $1 million home, but it's in a neighborhood of properties that are worth $150,000 because that property started out being worth $150,000, you're not going to find somebody that's going to want to pay $1 million to live in a neighborhood full of properties that are worth $150,000. That property is going to lose value. If you remember from your pre-licensing course, if you already took that, we call that regression, when a property loses value due to its surroundings. So you want to keep in mind the market value, especially if you're doing this flip strategy, but not as what you should pay, but ultimately what you're going to be able to sell it for. And you don't want to get crazy. You don't want to get too creative to try to make this market value higher. The more you try to make the market value higher, the harder it's going to be to get that market value. So you need to find a realistic market value and then be able to budget in how much it's going to cost to fix it. And that leaves you with how much you're able to buy the property for, just to break even, let alone any profit it is that you also want to factor in here, because you're probably not just doing this because it's fun. You're probably doing it because you want to make some money doing it. So in addition to this, you also factor in profit. Now, a good rule of thumb that you'll hear a lot of investment coaches and books and whatever say is that you should buy at 70% of this term that you see a lot of ARV, after repair value. So 70% of ultimately what this market value is going to be of the property, what it'll probably sell for after repairs are done in good condition. Again, not trying to push that number higher than what the neighborhood could handle, because again, you could over improve the property and not get a return on your investment. That'll eat up all of your profit there. And this might not be enough. Maybe you need to get it a little cheaper than that. Maybe you've got a little bit more wiggle room, especially if it doesn't need as much repairs. But also keep in mind, there might be hidden surprises in store for you that you might not know about. Just like the TV shows. That's the one thing the home improvement TV shows do get right, is the hidden surprises that'll sometimes pop up on you and cost you extra money and all that. So, the whole fix and flip strategy, as we've been talking about so far, it's really based on this idea right here. That you're going to buy the property at a discount. And that's how you're able to find deals even in a highly competitive seller's market that you see in a lot of places today, where property values are being driven up because of the lack of supply of real estate. That doesn't mean that there aren't good investment deals out there. That just means that you need to look harder to be able to find a property where an owner is in a position where they're wanting to sell under the market value of the property. And that probably is going to be related to the condition of the property and so on and so forth. But here's why fix and flip is the most dangerous way to invest in real estate, and why I would not recommend this as your primary strategy. Especially when you look at a lot of these home improvement TV shows. A lot of these home improvement TV shows, they go crazy with what they're doing to upgrade. And it could very easily turn into, especially when you're new to investing, it could turn into you wanting to make what you want in the property rather than what's needed in the property for that particular buyer. And that goes back to figuring out what is the goal, because if this is your strategy, you want to have your ideal buyer in mind for this property, so that way you could design to that ideal buyer, where you develop almost like a profile, an avatar of the ideal buyer, and you figure out, okay, this ideal buyer here, would they prefer a stall shower or a bathtub? Questions like that. And depending on whether your ideal buyer is going to be somebody that would need maybe a bathtub, or maybe somebody that would prefer a shower for whatever the reasons may be, that's, again, one of the benefits of knowing what that end is in mind. And then you have a more comprehensive, more cohesive looking property, because it all looks like it's designed for the same type of person rather than just being a kind of a hodgepodge of a bunch of random stuff that doesn't really make sense to any one person. But here's why, again, that's dangerous. It relies on speculation of the market, because this whole fixing thing here, that's usually not instant. You're usually taking at least probably 4 or 5 weeks, if not maybe a couple of months, to go through this to bridge this gap. And a lot of things can happen during that time, especially if you're not paying attention to market indicators. Now, you pay attention, you might still get it wrong, you might still be late to the party, but it's even worse, and it takes even longer to realize and get your ducks in a row to be able to make things happen, either complete the construction and renovation on the property as quickly as possible so that way you can sell it as quickly as possible because maybe the market's going down. But if that happens, that's where you get stuck with property, and that's where this could be a really dangerous way to invest in real estate, because a lot of times when people are going into the fix and flip type of investment, they're using more short-term financing potentially, maybe hard money, or maybe they're not able to afford the mortgage payment except for so many months, or whatever the case may be, that they might be in trouble if they're not able to hold on to the property. So that's really the whole fix and flip kind of philosophy there. Now, on the opposite end of the spectrum, you have the long-term rentals. And with long-term rentals, where you're a typical type of annual one-year rent of where you have a property or maybe multiple units that you're renting out. So the big benefit of fix and flip is you might be able to get a bigger payday. But also understanding, again, that end in mind, the fix and flip, you might be investing the most in the renovation compared to a rental, because maybe the property as a rental might rent out for $1,000, $1,200 a month. And for $1,000, $1,200 a month, somebody probably isn't going to be expecting stainless steel appliances and granite counters and all of these fancier amenities. But, maybe if somebody's considering purchasing this property, when they don't see a stone countertop or, maybe the appliances aren't as nice, they're seeing in their head that, oh, these are things I have to fix. They didn't completely renovate the property. They still have these cheap counters and these old appliances. Now, depending at the price point it is that you're at and the type of buyer that property would appeal to is, again, another question of whether or not they would even have those questions and whether they would even expect those things at that particular price point. But that's less of an expectation in the long-term rental typically than it would be for somebody buying a house equally of that same type of budgeting, I guess, to put it that way. So that's why this one might be a little bit more expensive to do as well. And again, coupled with that fact that this is really the most risky because this one is the most susceptible to market conditions, that's where you really want to be careful and really make sure you run your numbers and do your due diligence and have a backup plan. Have a backup plan in case you cannot sell this property. Because what happens if there is a turn in the market or something happens where you can't sell the property at the flipped rate, and you have two options now, basically. You either sell it for a loss or you hold on to it and wait, or you have a backup strategy with one of these other options here. So let's talk about the long-term rental. So with the long-term rental, the way you're coming up with value, and this one you really don't care about the market value whatsoever for a long-term rental. With a long-term rental, the way you're primarily determining the value is based on the cash flow of the property. And that's where we have the income capitalization approach, which if you remember from the course, now, if you haven't taken the course yet, the pre-licensing course, this is going to be a lot of information really quickly, but this is something you learn right in your pre-licensing course, how to use the income capitalization approach, where you have your different types of income, your potential gross income, your effective gross income, and your net operating income, and then you use the IRV triangle to get your formula to figure out, okay, what is the value of the property? So we're ultimately going to be looking for the value, which means we have to work through this whole income capitalization approach. And it starts with us figuring out, okay, what's the potential this property could gross before any expenses if this property was rented 100% of the time. And we're going to use an example you might have seen me use before with a 4-unit property. And that's the other reason why the rental might be a lot better option, especially when you start looking at multiple units. So let's take this 4-unit property, and let's say that each of these 4 units could rent out for $1,000 a month. That means $4,000 a month, potentially. Doesn't guarantee us $4,000 a month because we'd have to have it 100% rented and everybody paying the rent every single month to be able to cash in on that $4,000 a month. Or the trick with working with the income approach is you want everything in annual numbers. So when we multiply that by 12 months, that $4,000 becomes $48,000 for our potential gross income. So whenever you're dealing with income, you always want annual numbers. Even though rent is paid monthly, you calculate the value based off of the income, which is always based off of the annual income. Because what we're going to try to figure out here is what would be our return on investment if we paid cash for this property? Or given a certain return on investment, let's say we wanted a 10% return on investment, what should we pay for this property? That's really what we're going to be solving for this particular instance right here, to figure out, okay, what would this property be worth if it's got 4 units, $1,000 a month, renting for $4,000 a month overall across 12 months. That's $48,000 potentially. Keyword potentially. Now, to get down to our next level of income, we have to realize that the world isn't all about potential. The world doesn't always live up to its potential. Your tenants might not live up to the potential. Your property might not live up to its potential. So what does that mean? That means you might have some vacancy and collection losses. And that's what you take out to get down to the effective gross income. And let's say this is 10%. That we've got vacancy and collection losses of 10%. So 10% of this 48,000 is 4,800. It's our vacancy and collection losses. So we take out our 4,800 for vacancy and collection losses. That now brings us down to 43,200. And that's what we call our effective gross income. The difference being the PGI is what's potential, the EGI is what actually or effectively comes in. Because this is what we're taking out, the vacancy and collection losses, which should account for the times where the property is vacant and the times where somebody isn't paying rent. So we have one more level to go down. From EGI down to NOI, to net operating income. And to go from effective gross income to net operating income, the difference between the word gross means before expenses, whereas net means after expenses. Net meaning expenses taken out. So let's say the expenses to operate the property, that's what we're going to take out here, the operating expenses, which does not include your mortgage payment. That's a financing expense. That would be an expense of your business. That would be an expense of your investment company. That is not an expense of the property. The property doesn't need financing to operate. Your business might need financing to be able to acquire this property, but the property doesn't need financing. That's why mortgage payments or any sort of financing expenses aren't considered an operating expense. And what this allows you to do as a real estate professional is you could work up these numbers, and now you could present these numbers to any potentially interested investor, and then they could do their own due diligence to fact check and go through these numbers, as well as make a determination of whether or not this would still be a good investment for them if they are using financing as part of their business model. But for that reason, we do not include financing ever as an operating expense. So let's say our operating expenses are, we'll say like $20,000. That it costs us about $20,000 to operate this property every year. So that's our operating expenses. And then when we take that out, we're left with $23,200 of net operating income. So this property, after our operating expenses, if we paid cash for this property, we could expect $23,200 in income from this property, assuming we paid cash for it. because our property taxes, hazard insurance, all the expenses we need to operate the property should be included in that operating expenses. So the only other things we'd factor in after this for our business expenses would be if we're using any financing to get the money to purchase this, and now we have a monthly mortgage payment as part of this, and then also your personal tax liability as well. But speak with your accountant to see how you can minimize that tax bill, because real estate, it's chock full of ways to minimize your tax liability, to decrease the amount of money you have to pay in taxes because of allowed legal exemptions that exist for investing in real estate. Again, consult your accountant on those things. Now, this tells us what we could expect for income based on these figures, but we still need to figure out the value. And that's why this kind of looks like an hourglass, because we need to filter down to the right kind of income to be able to work with this IRV triangle to figure out the value. So we're looking for value. We circle what we're looking for, and then what's left over, I over R, is our formula. Now, what does I over R stand for? Well, the I is income, specifically the net operating income, because remember, we got to work down through this hourglass to get to this I, to get to the right kind of income. So our income divided by the R, which is for the rate, the capitalization rate. Basically, your return on investment, assuming you pay cash for this property. And then it's just a matter of plugging in these numbers. The value is the income, the $23,200. And now the rate of return, if this were an exam question where you're solving this, it would be given to you in the question, because they basically give you two of these numbers and ask you to find the third number. Or in the real world, you would look at the market and look at what's typical for a capitalization rate. And let's say in this particular market for this type of property, a 10% capitalization rate is going to be typical. Now, that might be high, that might be low for your market, but it makes for easy math, and that's why we chose that number here. Don't use that as the reason why you do that, but whip out the calculator so you can do the more complicated math with the bigger, longer numbers here, so you get real accurate numbers. All these numbers here ending in all these zeros, if you see something like this in the real world, that's a red flag that these are not real numbers. Now, how do I know these are not real numbers? Because I just made all these numbers up here. I made them up a while ago. I use this example all the time because they're nice, easy numbers to work with here, so that way the numbers don't get in the way of understanding the terms and what we're doing with all this stuff here. But in the real world, when you see numbers ending in zeros like this here, chances are those aren't real numbers. Those are made up numbers. They're estimates more than anything. And what that tells you as an investor is you should do your due diligence on all this here. But back to the easy numbers here. When we do this math, 23,200 divided by 10%, we can put that in our calculator as a decimal 0.10, or if you know what you're doing with that percentage key, you could do that too. And that's going to give us $232,000. And now, if you look at this kind of makes sense, because if we paid $232,000 and we got $23,200 of income, well, that would be 10% of our $232,000. 10% of $232,000 is $23,200, meaning, again, if we pay cash this much, $232,000, and we get $23,200 we take in, if these numbers are right, that means we're getting a 10% return on our investment. So cool. This would basically tell you what your return on investment would be and maybe what you should pay for this property based on it. But let's say you've got some plans for this property. Let's say you look at this property and you take a little bit of a closer look at it, and you're thinking that you could make some improvements to the property potentially. Possibly raise the rent a little bit. So let's say over the course of 2 years, you're going to plan on raising the rent of each of these units $100 a year. So at the end of 2 years, you're now getting $1,200 per unit. Now stick with me here, because we're a little ways from the end, but you're going to see how you're able to create value in a long-term type of rental type of property, which is why this is usually a much better way to go about investing in real estate, a much more stable way. Well, I don't want to say better, because fix and flip, you get a lot bigger payday a lot faster if you time it right. But if the market throws a curveball, which it doesn't normally do, but every now and then it will, when it throws a curveball. A lot of people get stuck there and they lose big. But with this here, if there was any change in the market, usually that's not affected. If anything, when there's a dip in the housing market, especially if there's foreclosures going on, well, what are these people going to do as a place to live? Well, if they just had a foreclosure, they can't buy a house for so many years after the fact, so what are they going to do? Well, they're either going to be homeless, which they're probably not going to do that. If they could scrounge together enough money, they still have a job, or maybe they're going to get a job. They're probably not going to just go live on the streets. They're going to get another home, but they're going to rent it because they're not going to be able to purchase it because of what happened to their credit. And so that's a huge opportunity that actually increases if the housing market decreases. So this is a lot more insulated from changes in the real estate market when you're investing in real estate. Now, let's say you do, because the key thing when markets change, the key thing is you have to wait it out. It's the whole thing, and if you're invest in stocks at all, I mean, the stock market's been all over the place, but when the stock market went down, the worst thing you could do is sell. The stock trading 101, or really investing 101, is buy low, sell high. Don't sell low. Don't buy low and then sell lower. That's a surefire way to lose money. Don't buy low and then also sell low. Even if it's the same price, inflation is going to get you, and so you're actually losing money because of inflation if you just break even. So profit is the name of the game here. And here's how you could actually increase the value of this property while it's a rental, while you're getting cash flow, while you're renting the property out. And then when you do decide to sell the property, you could take advantage of any appreciation that's naturally occurred from the market, as well as appreciation that might have occurred because of you increasing the rent, or decreasing the vacancy and collection losses, or decreasing the operating expenses. There's a lot of things you could do to make this number bigger. Now, let's say we bought it with the original numbers here. We bought it for $232,000. Now, what's going to happen when we increase the rents here? So if we're renting out for $1,200 a month, that now means that we've got an extra $800 a month coming in. So now we're talking about $4,800 that we're bringing in a month. And so when we take that $4,800 and multiply it by 12 months, we now have almost $10,000 more. We have $57,600 of potential gross income. Now, I want to do this here with just this one change of the rent. That's one change you could potentially make. But you could also potentially decrease your vacancy and collection losses, maybe potentially screening your tenants better, maybe being a little bit more particular about the tenants results in less collection losses, and maybe you invest in more marketing for the property so that minimize the time the property sits vacant. That's another way you could potentially decrease your vacancy and collection losses. But again, I want to keep the numbers the same to just show you how much more this is going to increase your value of the property just by everything else being the same and us just increasing the rent a little bit. Now, this would increase the value even more if we're able to affect these other things. We'll do that next. But for now, let's assume we have the same rate of vacancy and collection losses of 10%. We didn't do anything to fix that. We just raised the rent. And also, in theory, when you do raise the rent, even if you are getting better at screening your tenants better, making sure they don't want to leave, you raise the rent, there's a chance they might leave. So raising the rents could also affect this number as well, which is why you should still be proactive to try to keep that vacancy and collection loss low, because it's automatically going to go up, in theory, as you increase rents. So if we take now the $5,760, we subtract that out, that leaves us with $51,000. I mean, notice how we're way higher than what we were here for our effective gross income. We're now at $51,840. Again, let's assume that our operating expenses are remaining the same. Now, maybe we try to minimize our operating expenses, but maybe at the same time we're also increasing our operating expenses, because maybe part of us increasing the rent is maybe offering some new benefits, some new amenity, I don't know, something that maybe is costing us more money. So even though we might be being proactive to keep that lower, let's just keep it the same. Again, just to see how the rent affects this. So now when we take out this $20,000, we're not at $23,200 anymore. When we take $51,840 and subtract $20,000, we're at $31,840. $31,840. Now what happens when we plug that in for our income over here? $31,840 divided by 10%. Our value is no longer $232,000. Our value is now going to be $318,400. All we did was raise the rent $200. You raising the rent $200. If you could get the rents to $1,200 from $1,000 by time you decide to sell the property and you maintain all the rest of this year, you don't have any more higher percentage of people leaving, you don't operate it any more expensively, if you could maintain those things while increasing your rent, you've almost created another $100,000 in value. So when you go to sell this, and this is assuming that there's been no appreciation in the market. Now, what does appreciation look like in this? Appreciation would look like this number getting smaller, where investors are expecting less of a return, and this is going to be getting smaller. So, but this alone, everything staying the same, almost $100,000 more. So we're going to take a quick commercial break. Stick with us. I'm John Chrismo. You're watching Ask the Instructor.
The most powerful tool to study for your real estate exam is the Question Simulator from Tampa School of Real Estate. We've used our years of experience in preparing students for the Florida real estate exam to bring you the most powerful exam study tool available. In the Question Simulator, you'll be able to go directly to a particular unit so you can focus on the sections where you need the most practice. We have also included the percentages of each unit so you know which units are the most important for your real estate exam. Every question will immediately give you detailed feedback, which is almost always more important than the question or the answer themselves. After completing all the questions in a particular unit, you can go through question by question and review any that you've gotten wrong. You could also print out a report at the end of each quiz. The Question Simulator from Tampa School of Real Estate is 100% mobile compatible, so you can practice with test questions anywhere you have your phone with you. Enroll now at questionsimulator.com and get ready to pass your exam.
Hey, welcome back to this week's episode of Ask the Instructor. My name is John Chrismo. What we're talking about today is investment value and how this is just so much more than what the property will sell for. And literally the way you determine what a property would sell for when this is primarily geared toward it being a long-term rental, which would be the case maybe for a multi-unit property here. I mean, you can see there's immense benefit. And you could also do this same math to a certain extent, although there's a lot more factors you have to maybe that are more changing in the operating expense. But you could use this same type of formula to also figure this out being a short-term rental as well. Where the short-term rentals, you might have a much higher vacancy, probably not as much of a collection loss, but definitely a much higher vacancy rate. But then when somebody books a night or multiple nights of a stay in the property through like Airbnb or Vrbo or something like that, that's where they're paying much more on a nightly basis than somebody would be when they're renting this on a long-term basis. So again, similar type of math it is you might do to run this through this same example here. But again, you could see where you've got that potential that you still have flip potential in a long-term rental. And the benefit of this is you could get cash flow from day one in a situation like this. Maybe you're renovating these units unit by unit as they become vacant. As it becomes vacant, you go in there, you renovate it, you put it back on the market for $1,200. Another tenant leaves, you go in there, renovate it, put it back on the market for $1,200. And maybe if you're renovating it, maybe you're going to be able to increase this even more than just $200. Maybe the $1,000 versus $1,200 is just because the rents haven't been raised and it's below market rent, maybe as is condition. And that'd be a perfect example here if we're able to raise the rents to the $200 here. That's where, again, when you go to sell this property now, keeping that same capitalization rate by you increasing another $800 a month, that $800 extra a month translates to about $90,000 in additional value to this property. So you go to sell this property now, and you've got the extra $90,000 just sitting there waiting for you because you did the work of increasing the rent. And this is how all you got to do is get $800 more a month, and you can be able to get $90,000 more when you cash out on the property. Or the other trick here you might have heard about is all over the internet. It's not that new of a strategy, but the name for it I think is relatively new. The BRRRR strategy, where the R's are rehab, rent, and refinance. So rather than you selling off this asset that's paying you money every single month, you refinance to be able to tap into a large portion of this additional equity that you've got in the property here, but you're still able to keep the cash flow that you've got generated from this property. Which now that might allow you to do even further repairs to this property, or maybe get another property, or again, there's so many opportunities with investing in real estate. And even if you're not ready to invest in real estate yourself, you should start learning about it. Everybody should be a real estate investor, even if it's just your own home. And when people say your home isn't an investment, you're right until they go to sell the property and then they go make a bunch of money when they sell it, then it's a great investment. But during the time where it's not paying you, of course, yeah, it's not an investment if you're not getting paid for it, but you need a place to live. And you're either going to pay a landlord, which is a benefit of having the flexibility, but if you're not going to be moving every year, then maybe it makes a lot more sense to be in a situation where you're owning property, where you could take advantage of appreciation due to increases in the market. And look, if inflation continues to go on, which inflation always continues to go on, maybe at a little bit faster rate than it typically does right now due to a lot of circumstances going on, property values increase at a faster rate than inflation. Knowing that little detail that's covered right in your pre-licensing course will help you understand why it's so important to buy real estate with today's lower inflation dollars compared to tomorrow's higher inflation dollars. Because what inflation does is it makes money today worth more than money in the future. If you could go back in time, the money is going to be worth much more than it's worth today. And if you go into the future, the money is going to be worth much less than it's worth today. And it's just a question of at what rate over what period of time. But that always holds true with this whole concept of inflation. So you taking advantage of inflation means you buying property today to pay it back tomorrow with cheaper dollars. Dollars will be cheaper in the future with inflation. Again, it's just a question of how fast is the dollar inflating, how fast is the dollar losing value. But as long as it always is, it's always making more sense to pay back with cheaper future money. So, look, if it doesn't make sense, the logistics of it, I get it. It's a complex process. You really got to get deep down the money rabbit hole to figure out how all the whole money supply works to realize how powerful inflation is, especially when you know how to take advantage of it. And again, one of the great ways to take advantage of it is to take advantage of low interest rates. If you take advantage of low interest rates and you're able to pay it back with cheaper money, it's almost like you're getting paid to borrow the money. So, and that's where, again, where you really get deeper into economics and understanding that this money is just a piece of paper that we all believe is worth something. But as more of them are created, that belief drops, but real estate appreciates at a rate faster than inflation, so your real estate will go up in value while your dollars are going down in value. Which one would you rather have your dollars in? Would you rather have your dollars in cash that's going to be losing value, or would you rather have your dollars in an investment that's increasing value? And even as a homeowner, you're able to take advantage of that. And the thing about, worrying about, oh, what if the market goes down? It's only temporary. It's always only ever temporary. Because of inflation, because of just, if you look back in history, there's never been a market crash that has not rebounded and rebounded much farther and faster than that. That's why if you look at stock market charts and all these little trends over time, they're like, and they turn in these huge big lines. And that's, again, a primary driver of that is inflation. So don't let it scare you. Don't let it be something that takes advantage of you. Let you take advantage of it. And it starts by just understanding a thing or two about it. And that's why that's covered right in your pre-licensing course. A very small chapter, if you remember from your pre-licensing course, about understanding the real estate market. And whenever I would teach that class, I would always say that, hey, when we're talking about this chapter, it's really small. It's only 1% on your exam, but this is really important for you understanding what's going on in the real estate market, how money works. And there's a lot of stuff in that course that gets really exciting about that. So if you haven't taken our pre-licensing course, look, a lot of it is about laws and rules that you need to know to pass your real estate exam to get your real estate license, but at the same time, there's a lot of stuff here about figuring out investment value, about understanding how money works, about understanding the real estate market, about understanding taxes, whether property taxes or income taxes, and the exemptions and deductions that are there. It's not going to teach you everything about real estate, but it's a great place to start. So if you're ready to get your real estate license, or maybe you're just thinking about it and you have some more questions, call us up, 813-333-2676. That's 813-333-2676. We have advisors standing by to answer any questions you have, assist you in any way it is that we can. We don't want to help you just get your real estate license. We want to help you achieve a successful real estate career, your dream real estate career, really. So call us up. Let us help you with that, 813-333-2676. You can also check us out online at tampaschool.com. That's tampaschool.com. That's all the time we've got for today. Thank you guys for tuning in, and I'll see you on Friday for State of Real Estate. Hey, so if you're thinking about starting a real estate career, it could feel a little overwhelming sometimes. Look, that's completely understandable. That's why we're here to help. If you haven't already, check out our Success Center, tampaschool.com/success, or if you don't even know where to begin, give us a call. We'd love to help you out. We've got advisors standing by to answer any questions you have and assist you in any way it is that we can. Our phone number is 813-928-0106. Again, that's 813-928-0106. Give us a call. We're the Tampa School of Real Estate.
Do you want a career that allows you to be in control? With a career in real estate, you'll get to call the shots. Whether you're looking at starting part-time or want to become the next top agent, a career in real estate makes it possible. Find out what it takes at tampaschool.com. Do you want to incorporate studying for your real estate exams into your busy schedule? Now you can review the key topics you need to know to pass your class and state exams with our MP3 audio review. Simply pop in your headphones or connect to your car to reinforce crucial information while you exercise or drive. Listen to the first unit for free at mp3audioreview.com. That's mp3audioreview.com.
Are you thinking about a career in real estate? Hey, I'm John Chrisma with the Tampa School of Real Estate, and we've helped thousands of people just like you obtain their real estate license. If you're thinking about a career in real estate, give us a call. The phone number is 813-928-0106. Our advisors are standing by to answer any questions you have and assist you in any way they can. Hey, if you're enjoying the show today, which I'm sure you are, be sure to hit like, subscribe, post your comments, share with your friends and family. Thank you guys so much for watching.